The ballpoint pen was first invented in 1888 to replace the widely used fountain pen of the time. It utilizes a steel ball that rolls across the page while continuously receiving and spreading ink. The pen consists of the body, an ink reservoir, and ball and socket at the tip for writing. For the purpose of this report, we shall be discussing the pen's body.
The pen body will be subject to a number of undesirable interactions throughout its life, including but not limited to being dropped, squeezed, bent, or chewed on. Also to consider are the body's density for weight, cost, and manufacturability. Other factors would include flexural strength and torsion, however we are assuming only compression loading as the user presses onto the page unless they try to break the pen, and thermal properties irrelevant for its use. The average grip strength of a man is roughly 569 newtons, resulting in a required yield strength greater than approximately 29.3 megapascals. Mild steel, for instance, has a compressive strength of 170 megapascals. We rule out only the most brittle of materials. It is noteworthy that normal writing doesn't require maximum grip strength, rather only the strength to hold the pen in place, and so 29.27 megapascals is an excessive value. The main consideration for a material properties index is the overall cost of pen, which can be broken into material cost and manufacturing cost. The cost of raw materials is expressed in terms of price per kilograms prior to manufacturing. Overall, the ballpoint pen body has very little to do with the functionality of a pen. As a result, the manufacturer would likely prefer to minimize the cost associated with non-critical components and use cheaper materials that could achieve the same function as a much more expensive material. Under normal loading conditions, there are very few forces which a pen must endure. However, one force that a pen might be subjected to is bad habits. Many people unconsciously bite on their pens without realizing that they are doing so. The average human bite strength is 120 kilograms, or approximately 1186.8 newtons of force. With this information, we can begin designing our pen body. Now, to the material property index graph.
When considering this equation, the manufacturer wants to find the minimum value of this equation to find the cheapest material possible. The cost of each of the materials is a material constant, but the material properties such as yield strength will determine the required volume such that the pen will support loading. The pen body is constrained by cost, say at the very most $1 to manufacture, and the material's performance index can be developed of minimum material yield strength against cost. Taking the measurements of a standard big pen as the basis for the size of a pen, the volume of material cylinder can be calculated. In addition, the necessary yield strength can be calculated from the force applied by a human mouth and area of the body. Using CS, we developed a graph of all materials cost per pen versus yield strength. Although there are a multitude of materials above the trend line, we have decided to pursue metals and plastics for the pen body, as ceramics are either too brittle or too hard manufactured.
The previous equations and graph show all remaining materials that meet the required cost per pen versus yield strength. However, the equation is only valid for the cost of the finished product. If the manufacturing technique is additive, then the wasted material is a minimum and the above equation is valid. If the technique is subtractive like turning, then there is waste material from the manufacturing process. In some cases like polymers, the waste can be recycled and reused, but in the case of other materials like wood or treated steels, it may not be possible to quickly recycle these materials for repurpose. Therefore, there is an added cost associated with materials require subtractive manufacturing techniques. Lastly, the manufacturer must consider labor and volume of pens that can be manufactured per unit time. Extrusion and injection molding are incredibly quick processes with little expense other than the costs associated with building molds and requiring little manpower to run. Machining methods are too expensive and time-consuming, useful only for collector pens and high-quality parts. A pen body does not require high precision, therefore any materials that requires machining to manufacture should be avoided. In order to manufacture the most pens with the greatest profit margins, injection moldable plastics should be used.
Now that manufacturing techniques and overall cost has been considered, the last requirement that must be considered is the interaction of the user and the pen. As aforementioned, users may chew on their pen, a consequence of which the pen must be non-toxic to humans. Both metals and natural materials can be toxic such as lead, but metals have been ruled out as candidates for pen materials. Many common plastics are suspected carcinogens and have toxic effects on humans. Polystyrene, polyvinyl chloride, polypropylene, and are all suspected of leaching toxic chemicals that could be harmful to humans. Polyethylene terephthalate PET and high-density polyethylene are not known to leach anything toxic. A foreseeable issue that may occur with PET is plastic degradation over time. Exposure to UV light and changing temperatures could cause the body of the pen to weaken and become brittle over time. However, we don't anticipate this being a problem in the lifespan of a pen. Firstly, for the most part, pens are used at room temperature in an indoor environment. Pens are cheap disposable items that are often misplaced and will run out of ink before the plastic will degrade significantly. PET is already a very common material used to manufacture pen bodies. This is because this material really is an ideal choice for this application. As can be seen from the above discussion, PET fulfills all of the identified engineering requirements. The one potential problem with plastic degradation will not really be a factor over the short lifespan of a cheap pen.